You're listening to Relatable with Stephanie Michele, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Relatable. I am your host, Stephanie Michele, and today's going to be an awesome topic. I can't wait to dive in. And, just as life goes, I have the perfect segue for talking about virtual reality or augmented reality today. And so I'm going to share this. It's a little bit of emotional share, but, you've kind of known to expect that from me at this point. So I could lean into virtual reality at this point. I'm experiencing wanting to be in an alternative reality right now. And it's definitely due to an emotional, relational, emotional mess that I have to say I co-created because I had a role in the situation. Reflecting on it while I explore the research of why there's a rise in social anxieties and people experiencing why they're feeling so disconnected, I'm reflecting on my own experiences of, having some anxieties around how we're communicating and, are we truly connected? And in terms of relating, in terms of, what the real issue is, I think we're either disconnecting way too quickly. So we're assuming a situation via text or, short communication or not knowing somebody. And we're like, I'm out. I don't want any more of this. I'm out. I'm not curious. I'm out. It's not working for me. And then on the other side of that relating spectrum is maybe staying in something too long and it's not working and not having the tools to get out of it. And maybe it's even abusive. Like you're in it so long, you're kind of accepting the things that are negatively happening. And, that's the other side of relating that's not really working. And what I'm experiencing right now is like trying to find this perfect transition between the two of them, some middle ground. I don't believe we should be disconnecting as fast as we are. I think there's, boundaries play a role in things, but I don't think we should be disconnecting as fast as we are, and definitely not, stay into something that's not working for us. So I'm transitioning through, figuring out what this middle ground is. And I know transition is pretty messy, and I'm experiencing it right now. So, what I've learned in terms of connecting with somebody and like what I need in relationships, I know for sure that like there has to be some sort of mutual curiosity. Like asking people questions and have them ask questions about you feels really good to me. It feels like a safe segue to trust and knowing that there's sincerity there. So when I don't have that, I know it's going to be shaky for me to like feel and experience trust or want to go deeper in a relationship. And the other two things that I look for is the actual act of relating. And I know it's not there when there's like, when you find yourself defending yourself or another person's defending themselves, like that's not really relating. It's like anti-relating. It's more, it's not creating a situation where there is curiosity about, hey, what's going on, instead of telling somebody what's going on or telling them what the experience that they're having. And of course, the other thing that I really have found that I need when I'm establishing new relationships is just some awareness of one's own behavior, just some awareness of like how you're showing up in a situation. And, if that seems like a broad concept, I can tell you one thing. If there's a strong ego in the mix, there's probably not opportunity for someone to actually understand their role and their behavior in it. So in the case of my recent experience, I hired a person and none of these three things were present in the beginning. And I knew it, but I was in this transition of leaning into, hey, where's the middle ground? Let's find some middle ground. And I also was running short on time and running short on resources, and so I went forward into it. And the result was me feeling completely compromised and uncomfortable about the entire project, and it affected the outcome. It was undesirable. For me, other people thought it was fine, but for me, it was not how I wanted to work, and it was not the outcome that I wanted. So the reality that I'm in right now is a huge emotional hangover and caring so deeply about the experience and wanting the experience to be desirable for all people. And that includes me. So it's not just, putting everything out there for other people to have a desirable experience. Like, I deserve to have that too, and I didn't, and I said something, and, it created a mess. And what I'm learning is, in transition of relational learning, what I'm learning the most about this situation is like, not everybody's going to welcome or appreciate a game changer. And sometimes you might change the game too late and it creates more chaos. And, you know, I'm playing with this right now. I'm a work in progress. This is a journey that I'm on, and I'm definitely going to be sharing it on the show, you know, what the outcome of this particular situation is, and I'll maybe give more details in later shows. But, you know, definitely exploring, like, how can we find a better way to, you know, show up the way that we want to show up, interact with people and let them know what you're looking for too, and like establish a situation where we are relating and we're getting along and we're knowing each other and there's curiosity there. So despite that I'm joking and saying that I want an alter reality, I do choose the reality that I live in. As much as I know people are hurting, I know the flip side. I am surrounded by inspirational people. I have a lot of love in my life and have unbelievable memories in my memory bank of just amazing situations with people and how they've lifted me and inspired me and have been there in really cool situations. And my greatest desire for people is to have more of that, for people everywhere to have more of those experiences. And I know the more we believe in each other and care for each other, the better that reality gets. So what happens if we don't lean into that, you know? So if not that, then what is there? You know, if we stop connecting and caring and loving and tuning into this reality and tuning out, rather, and tuning into some of these virtual realities, what's it going to be like to enter a room or a place that is void of human contact? What does that look like? These are some of the things that we're going to explore today with my guest. And I have two guests today. And if you're watching the show, you will recognize that the guest that's sitting to my left is been here before, and you probably didn't suspect she would have something to talk about virtual reality. But Georgia Van Cuylenburg is back, and she is in virtual reality, and she's going to share some of her experiences. And it looks like just lost Steve. She's going to be sharing some of her experiences. So she has a production company called I Am Spartacus Entertainment. She's working with a number of VR firm filmmakers to create innovative ways to tell stories and produce documentary narratives in VR 360 to create social change. She is currently developing a VR why can I say that? I don't even want to say addiction today. Like,
no, apparently.
A VR addiction rehabilitation center, wow, based in Tulane University and is one of the founding members of Girls Making VR, which produces VR education to underserved teens. And I know something about her opening a VR AR studio sometime soon.
Yeah, we're opening a location-based studio for people to come and do all sorts of different VR and AR experiences.
Awesome. Can't wait to, this is part of you that I don't know too much about, so I can't wait to dive in. And we're also joined by Steve Aukstakalnis. Steve, are you there? I know we dropped.
I am here.
Okay, perfect. I know I saw you drop off, and I was trying to manage through reading Georgia's bio, but yeah, you're back now. So Steve is a research scientist, a lecturer, and author of 3 books in the field of virtual and augmented reality. He has spent over 2 decades working with academia, government, and industry in the application of immersive display technology in such various fields as architectural, national defense, and medicine. Steve's latest book is called Practical Augmented Reality. Hello, Steve.
I graciously appreciate the opportunity to be on your show today.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about you. So before we get into the topic, and I don't know, Steve, if you heard all of what I shared at the beginning, I'm always talking about something personal that's going on in my life and how I'm relating to it. And it's my way of kind of clearing the room, you know, what's pulling my attention. And I always ask the guests if there's anything that they want to share before we go into the topic. So is there anything that you just want to get off your chest that might be pulling a little bit energy before we talk about virtual reality and augmented reality?
I would just add that I thought that the segue into the topic was a pretty fascinating angle to make the jump.
The jump.
I can circle back into that as the conversation progresses.
Steve, I love where your brain is already. Because I was thinking the same thing as she was saying all of this. I wanted to jump in with different ways that VR and AR can help.
Yeah.
I was like, I know. And if you do VR, but I was like, I'm going to wait. So I'm on exactly the same page as you.
Great. Well, so I'm going to start with Steve, and I'm going to I know that you've just, you know, you've worked with people. You've been in this industry for a while, and you work with a lot of academia on the topic. So I want the definition of virtual and augmented reality from you, and then maybe explain what the difference is.
So why don't we start with augmented reality.
Okay.
The phrase augmented reality is a general term that's applied to a variety of display technologies that are capable of overlaying or combining alphanumeric, symbolic, or graphical information into your view of the outside world. And the way that this is accomplished is through what's known as a head-mounted display. When you put on a display, you're able to see through into your real world, but you will see letters, numbers, different icons or symbology that is contextually relevant to what you're looking at. So this could be, for instance, you put on the glasses and you're looking down the street, and you could have little street signs floating out in the air in front of all of the businesses all the way down the street. Mm-hmm. Or you could be in a surgical suite and you're overlaying medical imagery of somebody's hand onto the physician's real world view of the hand so that you can see the vascular structure or the bone structure, even though it's hidden by the skin. For pilots, overlaying, for instance, your air route or icons representing the positions of aircraft around you, even though they're too far away for you to see with your physical eye. And so this is just a means of enhancing your real world view with useful information. Now with virtual reality, it is a computer generated replacement for your full view of the real world. All that you will see is computer generated imagery. This is delivered to the user, again, through the use of a head-mounted display, but you cannot see through it. You have a flat panel in front of each eye, stereoscopic wide-angle optics, which will spread the imagery to cover most of your horizontal and vertical field of view, and one of multiple technologies that will track the position and orientation of your head so the computer knows where you're looking. And this gives you the visual sensation of being inside of that computer-generated environment. So you can, for instance, walk towards that virtual building. You can walk into or through the virtual door and then stop and turn around, physically turn around and look at the door that you just came through. So one's a complete replacement to your real-world view, and the other is a means of enhancing your real-world view with information that's relevant to what you're looking at.
Very, very clear distinction. Thank you for that. George, did you have anything to add?
I mean, he said it pretty much perfectly.
Yeah.
You know, I often use some simple examples, but I think that he covered it really well with the street signs and especially the piloting. And there's so many different exciting ways that AR and then also VR can come into it. But then I think one thing that's important, sometimes people get a little confused. Another thing to add in is they think that 360 video is the same as VR, and it's something to sort of make clear to people if someone's listening and they're not sure the distinction. We now can go on YouTube and we can go on our tablets and watch a 360 video by scrolling or by moving our screen in our hands. The difference we separate it because the VR is the HMD, as he said, the head-mounted display. 360 video is more a handheld experience.
That makes sense. So, George, I'm going to ask you, and then I'll ask you the same question, Steve. Why do we need either? And maybe take one that you want to talk more about. Like, why do we need these things? Why do we need virtual reality and augmented reality?
Okay. Oh my gosh. Answer that in less than an hour.
Yeah. You're going to have to give the highlights, so Steve can give his highlights as well.
I'll give top level answer to that.
Okay.
We are faced with so many challenges that are beyond our reach right now in life. It's kind of that thing of it's not working how we're doing it, and I think that's where tech comes in. Tech,
I can relate to that.
Exactly.
It's not
tech
working.
in our history has existed to solve social problems. The techs that have, technology that has lasted and innovated and continued to grow were things that were dealing with real world problems. And I think both VR and AR fall into that. And I think everybody was like, is it the next 3D? And my answer was no, 3D came and it sort of dropped off because it didn't solve a social problem.
Right.
It was fun. So to me, there are so many things like empathy that we need, compassion, heightened skills training, being able to access information for people that aren't, like training people that don't have the trainers available. There is for autism, for addiction, for PTSD, for all of major social anxieties. We know that VR helps now significantly. There is the simple thing of how do we communicate better with people from different parts of the world. We can be in a room with them in VR. So there's those sort of things. And technologically, we don't even know yet where VR is going to take us, because we've been able to prove that you can heal medical conditions by using VR, not learn how to. You can actually heal them with like eyes and all that sort of stuff. So VR and AR has so many applications. I'm excited. Steve, I think, knows more about the AR applications than I do. I've focused a lot more on VR. But AR has the ability to add information into our world to streamline and to make procedures and communication faster and more effective and more impactful. So to me, VR and AR are the most exciting thing, because we really are at a precipice with so much in our world where we don't have the answers we need to solve so many major social concerns. And I believe VR and AR actually take us a lot further than we could get just with our own little, steps.
So for specific things, like you're talking about, like, specific kinds of healings or, learning opportunities, Steve, what would you like to add? Why do we need, and if you want to focus on one or the other, feel free to do that.
Well, I'll come at this from and those comments, I got to tell you, this is a fascinating way to set up the show, in that you're coming at this topic from two completely different but very complementary angles. And I will come at this from the technical side. Human beings were spatial beings. We see, hear, touch, and move through our surroundings in 3 dimensions. Yet literally every computing information tool, every interface that we use in order to interact with computers and other complex machines always relies on 2 dimensions. Moving a 2-dimensional mouse across a tabletop in order to move a cursor across a 2-dimensional screen. And VR and AR leverage the strengths of the human perceptual system, so that you're able, and through this, you are able to process so much more information. For instance, if I gave you a printout of the numeric definition of a tetrahedron, for instance, and it printed out, on 20 pages of letters and numbers, and then you compare that with a 3-dimensional image of a tetrahedron, which one do you think you're going to assimilate faster and understand? And so on, obviously the graphical side.
Absolutely.
So these 2 technologies, they leverage the strengths of the human perceptual system, and the technologies are being used in order to solve problems by doing that, by letting, for instance, physicians treat patients more effectively and efficiently, to let warehouse workers find the bins when they're doing different picking tasks, or allowing pilots to have an increased level of situational awareness, or giving architects the ability to put a client inside of a building that they've designed for them months before they ever turn a single spade of dirt in a construction process. And so there's the applications for which the other guest has been discussing, and then there are the ways that, for instance, industry is applying it in order to solve problems, increase efficiency. So there's what I would add to that particular question.
What came up for me, Steve, when you were sharing that is, so my background is marketing, and as social media kind of came into the space, and all senses were being engaged in marketing messages, and your friends are involved, you're seeing things, you're typing back messages. We talked more about experiential marketing, like an experience will bind you to something or teach you something faster than just reading text or or just touching one sense. So I could relate to of course you would learn better or learn faster or have more knowledge if you could do it through an experience rather than a book or having somebody tell you, or any of the other ways that we can learn. So I got that. I got that. So I think you guys have done a good job of going, okay, there's good applications out there. This is why we need this. This is a good thing. You know, there's some social good. Georgia wouldn't be involved if it wasn't social good, because that's her thing. That's my thing. So let's talk about the bad. You know, let's go there. You know, definitely there's issues with kids playing violent games. And now, you know, thinking about them playing in more of a virtual experience and having this experience where they actually could experience PTSD, couldn't they? I mean, they could actually have traumatic connection to, you know, their experience of violence. Like, what should we, you know, how should we approach this? I mean, should we be worried about virtual reality with the potential to magnify the problem of like violence that's in video games and things? Maybe. Can
I take the first crack at that?
You could go ahead. You both wanted it, but you got in there first. Yeah, you got the straw first there, Steve. Go ahead.
So I'm going to, as a scientist, I'm going to stick with the what the literature says. The published scientific literature does draw a correlation between violent video games and different forms of either increased aggressive thought or behavior on the part of adolescent users. There is also an equal body of scientific literature that argues against that. And this is an area that, if you think about this, how to conduct a research project that would actually look at the impact, you would need to be studying subjects for years over an extended period of time in use and monitoring behavior in order to draw correlations like that. But I think I got to be really careful here, because there's a massive industry that's built up around this, and like all games, everything that kids are being exposed to and so on, I think a lot of this is games like this, they're going to be made regardless. If there's a dollar to be made, if there's an industry to be formed around it, somebody's going to take advantage of it. And it boils back to parental control. If a parent thinks it's too violent for their kids, and to monitor what they're looking at and so on, I think is the right side to come down on something like this, at least at this point in time, before there's ratings and so on, you know, that you have to attach to games and all of this and that. But I think parental monitoring for younger people that are using these technologies is very prudent.
I would have to agree with that. I want to hear George's answer to this too. I like the idea. I'm not a parent, Steve, but I have 14 nieces and nephew and a couple on the way. So I feel I can speak about this. I care about these kids. I like the idea of asking a why question around this. Like, why Brian, or why Kyle, my firstborn nephew, why Kyle do you want to shoot up things in a game? Like, I'd like to have some context around that, you know, around that answer to you know, for a parent to have that conversation and go, oh, you know, if it's just a fun thing to do with your buddies, and, you know, if the answer feels pretty safe and healthy, you know, then I think that it's okay, maybe, you know, and if it doesn't, then, you know, there's some more exploration that needs to be done there. But a why question seems appropriate here. Georgia? Yeah,
and I think, Steve, I'm similar to you in that I used to be very anti-violence in games, coming from a non-violent perspective, but ironically, I now am similar to you. There's a huge industry that supports me in the video game world now, and I'm very grateful for my understanding that I've gained as to the benefits of some of that experience.
You should tell him. You're like a character in a game, right?
I'm a character in a lot of games. So I now have to absolutely watch my words, but actually genuinely have changed my opinion. And I think you're right, Steve, in that it goes two ways. And I get very nervous when I see unguided and, you know, free-form children turning up and putting the headset on without a moment with the parent. I will not, in my purview, I will never allow a child to put on a headset without me knowing the parent. or discussing it with the parent first. And the same with video games if they're violent. I do think that this is something where there are, 95% of kids can go through a violent video game, and it's actually has been proven, like Steve said on the caveat, it can be good for them because it actually enables them to let out some things and let out some feelings. And I've seen that because I've seen this community of pent-up, raged individuals who play the game and then are really lovely afterwards. So I have seen that. However, if a parent isn't aware of the challenges that their child is going through and puts them in that, we know the stories. We know what can happen when a parent, whether it's with a video game or whether it's giving them access to guns or whether it's giving them, it's the same conversation. If the parent isn't helping that child integrate their brainish, the issues that they're neurologically dealing with into a living life, then putting them in a video game is really not going to help. That being said, the one thing, and Steve, I'd be interested to know your opinion on this, the research that I have done a lot, because I work a lot with children, Steve, and I get asked this all the time because of working in both industries. And one of the pieces of information that I do share is that the research that Jeremy Bailenson has out of Stanford does say that we do have evidence that younger children, and this is really, we're talking young up to 15, cannot separate, a week later, if you put them in VR, they're not sure what was real or what was in virtual reality. So that's something that concerns me a little bit, and I think it can work for good as far as, and it's this funny thing, the same way that I've talked to veterans who play video games to help them deal with their PTSD in the same way that you could be a little concerned. But I think it's really important for our viewers and listeners to know when we talk about PTSD treatment, when we talk about addiction treatment, and we're using this sort of video game format or any sort of experiential immersive VR treatment is what we use when we do these treatments, there's a therapist sitting next to them. The idea is to put them back in the environment, to recreate it for them so that the therapist can help them through recreating that story, because there's no amount of talking, the same way that Steve was saying, it's like there's no amount of paperwork that's going to replace being in there and experiencing it and being able to say, I'm feeling triggered right now. Okay, let's talk through it. And so that if they're ever in that environment or something comes up again, they've had the experiential therapeutic treatment. So the same way that video games can really help kids experience things and get things out of their system, we just need to be aware of what we're putting our child into. But Steve, I don't know if you wanted to add anything about to the memory attachment, because that was something I was very keen to hear your opinion on.
I don't think I could do justice by adding anything more to what you've said.
Okay.
You've summarized that very, very well. There are perceptual ramifications in the use of these technologies as well. For instance, more than half of everyone that puts on a stereoscopic head-mounted display feels some level of nausea or dizziness initially. And this is the result of when you have the visual sensation of motion, but you do not have the corresponding vestibular cues or the inner ear cues. And that conflict or that detachment in the normal flow of sensory information causes a negative reaction by the body initially. This is the exact inverse of motion sickness. If you can imagine being inside of a boat where you don't see much motion, but you can feel it in your inner ear, and you end up getting nauseous, well, this is simulator sickness, or what they call visually induced motion sickness, is this simply the inverse of that, where you have the visual sensation, but you don't have the inner ear cues. So if you're looking in, let's say that you're riding a virtual roller coaster and you're seated, and the visuals that you're getting swung all over the place, going up and going down, but the vestibular system is saying, no, Steve, you're sitting there on the couch still. That mismatch of sensory information will initially result in what's called increased stomach awareness, and maybe some dizziness, some sweating, and for those that push it, it can progress into nausea. Surprisingly, individuals of Asian descent are far more susceptible than their Western colleagues.
Who did that research? Like, how do we know that? That's interesting.
I'm just talking about what's inside of the scientific literature, and all of this is laid out inside of the book, that women are more susceptible. Asian women are even more susceptible to that. So there's a lot that we just don't understand about these technologies, about their social ramifications, the physiological ramifications, perceptual ramifications, because they just haven't been around long enough and used in commercial products have only been available for about 2 years now.
That's something that's so important for people to understand, is the longevity of trials being able to be done on a large scale basis. Because Steve, you've been working this for a long time, but that was in labs and I'm guessing, in these contained environments. But we have to keep saying to people, you got to understand, the Oculus only came out in 2015. It's like we don't have long-term longitudinal data on this stuff, but we're going to. Yeah. And I think in the same way that the technology is going to improve, and I see it as shooters, and I mean video shooters in the context of this conversation. And now every single videographer, I'm like, please don't move the camera. When you're filming, find a way to cut and move to another location where you're stationary, because you're going to make your viewer sick. So people are learning. I see it a lot less now, a lot less movement in the camera. And I'm sure as things like frame rate and all of that sort of increase, we're going to be able to mitigate that nausea somewhat. But this is a baby industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, she makes a very good point there, a very astute point, that there is an entire new area of science that's emerging from this. For instance, in the cinematic arts, how to frame, very well established techniques have built up Hollywood to be what it is right now. How to frame an image, how to keep people's attention focused in a particular area. But this is dealing with a simple window in front of you, looking into a 3D world. Using these immersive technologies, all of this has to be redesigned. All of this has to be thought out again. How do you, if you give people the ability to look behind and above themselves and so on, in an immersive cinema production, how do you keep people's attention focused in a direction that you want them to, so that they can watch a story unfold?
It redefines storytelling. It's very exciting.
If I could circle back for a moment, I think it's important to note on the issue of the experiencing nausea, in that most individuals also, after 2 or 3 short exposures to a fully immersive display technologies like VR, they adapt, and these these feelings of nausea or disorientation and so on actually do pass, and they're no longer an issue.
I'm laughing, Steve, because I don't know if you've ever YouTubed dogs in shoes. And do it. You'll laugh as well. But there's this thing where people will put dogs in shoes, and for the first time the dog tries to walk without actually walking on their feet, and it is the most awkward thing. But then they adjust, like they get over it. Like it's so weird and not normal to them, but they get over it. I don't know why that popped in my head, but that's kind of
we adapt in life.
You get over it. It's weird, but you get over it. Okay, let's talk. Since we're here, we've talked about violence. What are some of the other ethical concerns about these technologies? And maybe I'll start with Georgia here, and then we'll go to Steve.
Oh gosh, ethical concerns. Well, this is somewhere where I don't focus too much on the negative in anything in life, and so for me, the major concerns have always been around that memory implanting. That worries me. One of the concerns we don't know is children's eyes are still developing. How is that safe? Do we know what age? Oculus came out with a number when they were acquired by Facebook. They decided 13 and under was a no-go. Or maybe 13 and above was fine. Anything under was not okay. And so everyone was like, oh, VR doesn't work for people under 13. And I was like, that's not true. It just means that Oculus decided that was liturgically a good choice. So there's still a lot for us to learn, and also for adults. We don't know yet how it's going to affect our eyes long term. I think ethically, to me, all I can see is the good.
Okay.
I mean, once we get past the violence, once we get past, the only thing that came up talking about buzzing on my brain and mind was I wanted to use my headset in a Starbucks today, and I was thinking, can I put a headset on and leave my belongings where I can't see them? So there's a funny ethical concern, because it did happen for us. I was showing a game a couple of weeks ago, and a guy lost his bag. Now, it turns out another guy accidentally took it. No one stole it. But at the time, it brought into a new world of me, like, what if we're in a VR world and we can't see the world around us and something happens to us?
Yeah.
So there is that. This good old story, the Segway creator segwaying off the cliff and killing himself comes to mind. It's like, what are we going to walk ourselves into in our technology that we created? But to me, the ethical positivity of connection, which is so funny to me when you made that first call to me and you were like, I just don't get it, how we could relate well by putting something on our face. And I was like, we're going to relate so much better. And I do believe that, and we can get into that in a second. So for me, the ethical stuff, the good far outweighs the bad.
All right, scientist Steve, you're going to have to take this. She's not giving us anything here. So what are the ethical concerns that you might have, or that might be there with the technology?
Maybe you can talk about the military side. I didn't mention that.
Or porn.
Hello.
I'll
try this first from. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to first approach this from. Let's talk about shared virtual environments, where, for instance, you have people in England, people in France, people in America, and you're all inside of the same 3D model. You have virtual representations of each of your bodies, or what you can call a persona form, and virtual groping.
Oh, yeah.
I thought of this last night. There's actually some of this is spinning up right now.
Yeah.
You can find references to this through news searches online and so on. There's things of this nature. There's some of these established massively multi-user computer worlds. Some of them already have pedo world, where you can go in and play with virtual representations of kids. And so these are some of the areas that are starting to pop. You provide an opening, and somebody's going to find a way to slither on through and feed a desire to a particular deviant part of the crowd. There's a lot of demos and so on that people are creating in order to show the depth to which you can touch somebody's emotions with this. For instance, at the last SIGGRAPH show, somebody was walking around giving demonstrations of a virtual reality guillotine, where you can experience what it's like to have your head cut off and roll down a embankment into a basket. Lord. I'm sorry, but this is just,
this is what it is. This is what's out
because there. You can make it doesn't mean that you really have to make it.
I agree.
What a waste of money.
I agree. So how do you see like the consumer market really catching up with maybe the legal aspects or legal implementations of some of these things? Because obviously we don't want virtual experiences that that it's okay to have like a pedophiles and different different experiences happening that shouldn't happen, or that are legal to happen in real life. So like what's happening to kind of catch up with what's going on in these virtual worlds?
So I'm a firm believer in the free market, and the free market tends to cleanse itself. I cannot see titles like Guillotine World being big sellers. And so beyond that, there would be, I'm assuming that at some point in time, there's going to be various types of ratings that can be put onto the different Sims that you can purchase. I think it's also incumbent upon those that own those shared properties, the massively multiplayer user environments, those that own the servers that dish out the visuals and so on. I don't think there's enough there yet to warrant concern, but eventually there's going to have to be, my hope would be that there would be some standards that would evolve, that everyone would collectively agree to and say, yeah, we don't have to go there. But now, that's wishful thinking, though. We live in an interesting world.
Yes, we do.
Where just because you're saying let's not do it, that gives impetus to people to actually build stuff like that. So
what other major changes are coming up with these technologies? What can we kind of expect in the near future? And maybe can we do a now 5-year, 10-year kind of scope look? Steve,
Georgia, you want to take a? Okay, I'll jump at that. Yeah. I think one of the
she looked like she needed to think a little bit, so we'll give her some thinking room. Yeah, we'll let you
let's start with the display technologies. Right now, the head-mounted displays that are commercially available are built with enabling technologies that were not intended for it. For instance, the flat panel arrays that are inside of the Oculus and the HTC Vive and the other head-mounted displays that are out, those were originally designed for other uses. For instance, in a cell phone. There are companies now that are working on lightweight, multi-use displays, meaning you can use it for virtual or augmented reality, that do not have those flat panels and the heavy optics in front of each eye, but that will project imagery into the eye and use the retina of the eye as the imaging surface.
Wow.
These are about 2 years away, and it's from being in this field as long as I have and interacting with many of these companies now, I firmly believe that 3 to 5 years down the line, all of the head-mounted displays that are currently being sold are going to be gathering dust on shelves, because the next generation of displays that come out will be extremely lightweight, dual use, higher resolution, wider field of view, and they will come close to looking like a pair of Bolle sunglasses, as opposed to something huge that's hanging off the front of your face. That makes it kind of socially unwise to walk down the street wearing.
And then you maybe could see your belongings, like Georgia said. You could have a better sense of like what's happening in the real world, right?
Yes, and then you're also going to start to see a lot more integration of binaural 3-dimensional sound as well. That's correlated to the visual scenery that you see. So if you hear a virtual saxophone playing off to your right-hand side and you physically turn, you'll see that virtual saxophone. You'll be able to walk around the apparent source of that sound, be able to test acoustics of the closed spaces of a building that you're designing. And the audio side it's racing quickly in catch-up mode to the visual side, as the adding audio to any of these fully immersive environments can be huge in terms of the giving people a more convincing sensation of presence inside of that computer-generated imagery, or as they used to say years ago, the suspension of disbelief.
Yay!
What about smell? Is that being developed?
That's a thing.
Yeah,
they totally have
is that
it.
5-year, 10-year?
That's now.
That's now.
Yeah. They have what they call haptics, related to VR, very much the sensory experiences we have in relation to the HMD that's on our head. So you have chairs, you have treadmills, you have all that sort of stuff, but then there are demos that are being done now with smell and all sorts of different touch. There's a technology where you can touch pads that look the same, but they will change the sensory experience of the touch per what you're touching in the display. So we have all of that.
Can I add on to that? For instance, at the University of Southern California, the Institute for Creative Technology,
I love Skip. I love him.
In their work in using fully immersive virtual environments in the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder. So you'll give the soldier head-mounted display. You'll put some type of a weapon in his hand, just mock-up AR-15, for instance, and then you'll have him stand on a platform where there's bass thumpers that can vibrate the surface that you're standing on to give you the tactile sensation there. And then they have a little machine that has scent containers and little fans that will blow out, for instance, the smell of burning rubber, diesel, garbage, and so on. So you've got the visual side, you've got the audio environment, and then you start to add the sense to it. And a vast majority of the soldiers that use this system, they rave. They just, the realism by feeding information or stimuli to each of the senses that's relevant to the environment within which they had some traumatic experience gets very real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So it's not so far out. It's all, what I'm hearing is it's there. I mean, obviously it's not there in the consumer market.
It's being used in over 50 VA medical centers across the country right now.
Yeah.
That's how real it is.
Yeah, and we're actually integrating it into, Steve, I'm not sure if you caught the start, but I'm a new owner in a center, and we are going to be doing PTSD treatment and anxiety treatments within there, as well as commercial and theater and all that sort of stuff, because we think it's important to educate people on how this does good for the world as well. So it's growing.
Yeah.
It's so exciting to me.
I like that idea, and I never thought of this before speaking with both of you today. I like that idea that you go somewhere and you're introduced to the technologies by a real person instead of like getting the headset and doing this by yourself, and you know, and it being this other thing that you're now that's drawing your attention. For me, and I was going to start the show with my headset on, Steve, that I got when I got my new Galaxy phone, but I thought that would be too weird. But for me, you know, when I got the phone, I was telling Georgia this earlier, they offered the headset for free. And at the time I was like, I don't want it. You know, and the girl was like, it's $100 value. Why don't you want it? Everybody wants this thing. You need it. And for me, it was like, I don't want to have another thing that I'm doing that's taking me away from like spending time with my family or, you know, having these real experiences. And I wasn't that into it, but I did get it. And, you know, I could see, I mean, I can definitely connect to some of the things that you're talking about for good and for training and learning and such. But it also drew so much power and space on my phone that like I eventually deleted it, and I don't want to get too lost there yet.
So can I add in something that I definitely thought of when you were sharing that with me before the show? And in answer to your question of where we're headed, as far as more, the technology side is so exciting, and thank you, Steve, for addressing that. But on the application side of social application, I think it's so exciting. But I think, Stephanie, you have a show called Relatable. Your job in life is to relate really well. So you spend a lot of your time working on your experience of relating. You are not the same as everybody else.
I realize that.
So for you, you look at a VR headset and go, but why do I need this thing? There are so many people who do need this thing because they're having trouble. Like, we know that VR helps autism because it helps children have a safe experience of relating before they're required to have the experience of relating. It gives people who, the same way that I now love my video game fans because I understand that they have an issue with face-to-face communication, it gives them a safe place to communicate with people. VR can do that as well for people. It creates another environment for them to feel accepted, to feel understood, and to actually communicate in a way they wouldn't. Whereas you would pick up the phone and call your family, they would sit by themselves in silence. So there is that to consider. So I think that's why for you, you were kind of like, do I need this? But I wanted to quickly, because I know timing is of the essence.
We are getting there.
Yes, but I wanted to say that socially, 5-10 years down the track, there are so many incredible possibilities when you think about it, because we are now getting the data in that shows us that VR can deal with pain management. It can lessen your anxiety. It can solve PTSD. Like, it can create cures to solutions to issues that medication has been the answer for in the past. And I don't know about you, but I'm if we can avoid medication, let's do anything possible. So for me, the possibility that we could cure conditions by experience is very exciting, especially with kids, especially with somebody who's got major anxiety disorders that are not necessarily something that you know, they'd be on medication forever. But if you can rewire the neural pathways, they don't have to be on medication forever. So there's that, but then it's also, there's so many social applications that this will become common day. The way that you're now looking at it going, this is different.
My reference point, though, is we heard all this with social media, like how it was going to help us stay connected and we're going to have more information. And now we have like 8 influx of people that have social anxieties because they're spending way too much in this space. And they're only relating there, and they're getting into these ridiculous political debates or any other kind of debate, you know, in comment section on Facebook, instead of like, you know, really checking in with the person and going, okay, what did you mean by that? So that's my sensitivity, because I mean, I use social media for clients and things, but I am experiencing and I'm sensitive to the data around social anxiety, around in particular, the use of social media and how fast that information is coming at us, and of course, online dating apps.
So can I put you a good and a bad to that? Yeah. So the good of virtual reality to me, I said one of my friends wants to create a social media VR sharing platform. I said that actually excites me because you can't Photoshop in VR the way that you can, because how people crop their photos. Yeah, we're
experiencing virtual reality through Instagram right now. I mean, everybody's perfectly curated.
But that's the difference to me. If you're talking about a 360 world, you can't crop out the truth. So if somebody's social media sharing a 360 image of where they are, their bedroom that looks all fancy and shiny and makes other people feel guilty because they're not a YouTube Instagram celebrity, and then they turn around and realize they live in a 1-bedroom apartment and they just framed it really nicely. Yeah. It actually breaks down walls to me, the 360 social sharing. However, if you talk about augmented reality and the possibility of photoshopping people in real life, there's that. Where I'm like, oh my gosh, are we going to start wearing glasses where people's eyes look like those silly Barbie eyes that girls are putting on themselves every day? This is the stuff where that worries me a little more.
There's reason to be concerned. Steve, do you want to add anything to this? This is pretty much our closing in on this topic.
I'm sure a vast majority of those that listen to the show have members of their family that, or know of someone that are suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's. And these technologies over the past year have demonstrated profound impact in not curing, but providing moments of clarity for family and the sick to be able to connect. And so, for instance, you can go online, do a Google search for virtual reality dementia, and you'll find slew of videos where grandma's sitting in a chair, she's all crinkled up, she's not talking or anything. They put the head-mounted display on, and the visual scene is a nice forest or a beach setting. And all of a sudden, they're out there looking around going, wow, look at this. I used to do this when I was a kid, and so I used to go clamming and all that. And, at that moment, you'll start to see family members then start to converse with the sick individual and having conversations they haven't had in years with them, because there's just this moment of clarity that's opened up and so on. And things like this, there's, as Georgia was referring to, there's just so many profound applications in these areas that are forthcoming that should start to be regular parts of the treatment and care of sick individuals, whether or not it's burn patients that are using the head-mounted displays as a distraction while they're cleaning wounds, or treatment of dementia and so on. There's lots of great stuff coming.
And Stephanie went through, I know your timing, but it's so important on the relatable topic. We haven't talked too much about relating, and I want you to consider, as somebody who it's so important to me, the greatest, and the reason why I pursued VR in the first place was nonviolent communication. The possibility that we have in VR to take two warring groups, or two groups that believe they have nothing in common, and bring them together to communicate, but first putting them each in an experience of the other person's life, to literally walk in their shoes for 5-10 minutes and then bring them in a room together. I think the future of communication is around warring factions and the UN, which is already, VR's already in the UN, places like that, to be able to make social decisions and bridge gaps with VR and AR is so beautiful that I hope and I trust that in 10-15 years we'll be using the technology to do profound peacemaking movements.
I hear that. I don't doubt it. Really, even coming from both sides of you, I just know, as like Steve pointed out earlier, you just know the world that we're living in. There's this other side, and it's cool that we have you looking at it from a social experience, me still wanting to create real social experiences, and maybe there's an opportunity to put that in there too. But as long as we're thinking about it, talking about it, there's opportunity for the technology to be used for good, and as long as there's awareness for how it might fall into the wrong hands and create a situation where we're more void of the tools that we need to interact and stay in relationships with each other. As long as we have awareness around it, stuff will be done to help it. So I can leave it there.
People like
I can
Steve
leave it
doing
and have
the research.
peace in my heart, knowing that there's different angles that are happening here. So we definitely are running short on time. We're running to the end of the show, and so we're not going to do fun table topics. Steve, I usually ask guests to share something just as a dedication or just a tribute to someone, just as a means to go, look, it's not so hard to share deep feelings, and we need to do this a little bit more in the world to show what empathy looks like, and it doesn't have to be so scary. And we have about 2 minutes, so if there's anybody, either one of you want to just give a shout out to that says, hey, I'm thinking about you, and this is how amazing you are, and this is I like how you're showing up in my life. If we can do that really quickly, you both have got like 30 seconds to do it.
I'm going to hand all of my time on this matter to Georgia.
That is so sweet. She's going to use it too. I think you got enough of her personality to know.
So that was very smooth of you. Yeah. Very smooth.
All right, girl, you got it.
Okay, fine. This one's for you and me together, Steve. I'm going to combine science and heart. The person that is definitely on my heart today is my old assistant, Shannon Murphy, who is one of the most beautiful human beings in the world. And there is a VR connection to this because she had a stroke. She's 20 years old. She had a stroke a couple of months ago and has changed in every way other than who she truly is on the inside. Her physical is not working with her insides right now. Wow. And it's very scary. We don't quite know why. And there's a lot of things she's going to have to relearn. And I think she's particularly on my heart today because she shared with us as a group of friends an email to explain what happened and how she was misunderstood in the first 48 hours. She was accused of being a drug addict. She was accused of all these sort of things because she lives on a college a campus, and she's now in rehab and she's now getting better. And it makes me so happy to know that over at USC right now, they have a stroke treatment in VR where they're able to integrate body parts back in.
Wow.
So you retrain the experience of seeing your arm move and seeing your legs move and seeing your mouth move in a mirror so that the neural pathways can retrain to actually help you do that in the long term. So it just connects everything back to me. But if you're asking me who's on my heart, it's her and her recovery and the possibility that my new love could help her with my real love of her.
And probably her bravery for going through that, huh?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I loved having you both here today to talk about this. It was really great talking with you, Steve, and Georgia had a different angle. I think we could probably do about 4 of these shows and go a little bit deeper. So I really appreciate you calling in, Steve. If you want to learn more about Steve's work, you can go to practicalar.com. And Georgia's company is I am Spartacus. I can't say that without saying that.
Spartacus Entertainment.
I am SpartacusEntertainment.com, and I will definitely share those links after the show via social media. And to the listeners, we now have an archive page on my site, StephanieMichele.com, that shares some resources, gives a backstory on guests. So check that out. I always have the show up by the next day, so you can check that out and any resources that we shared. So I'll put links to Steve's book as well.
I'm buying your book tonight, Steve, by the way. I'm very excited to read it.
Fantastic.
All right. Thank you both. Next week, we're going to be talking to the founder of Sidewalk Talks that actually gets volunteers out on a sidewalk and they have conversations, anything anybody wants to talk to, they can sit down. That's totally my thing. I'm so looking forward to that. So we'll be doing that. I'm still looking for a closing tagline. So until then, I'm just going to say, hey, I would challenge everybody to explore relating with more curiosity, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
You're listening to Relatable with Stephanie Michele, only on LA Talk Radio.